Why do you think so many people care about power and respect so much?
It usually was withheld from them, I think. I think the things that were withheld from us are the things that usually we seek the most. I think. How many really successful guys have daddy issues? You know what I mean? So many.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I didn't get his respect, so I'm going to have to compensate with my circumstances, with my environment, so that everyone respects me. And some people do that through fear. Some people do that through violence. Some people do that through success. It really just depends what vehicle you choose. But like, I feel like the deep need is the same.
Yeah, there's something like, I can't remember the statistic, but a number of U.S. presidents, a big number of them like grew up without a father, or their father died early in their life. And there was, I can't remember the stat, it's like 30 or 40% or something of like the U.S. presidents lost their father or didn't have a father or something like that early on. And it's like, well, you know, now they're going to go prove something or go to be something, you know, what about the habits that you learned of the wealthy people once you started to really earn and scale your wealth? Were you studying wealth, or were you just fixated on like, how do I get one more customer and increase my prices, make better product? What did you learn about the habits of the rich?
I haven't learned much about the habits of the rich at all, to be very candid with you. I think that maybe there are some beliefs that, because like my dad was a doctor, I wouldn't say he was like, you know, ultra wealthy, but like we lived an upper middle class, you know, lifestyle. But in terms of like wealth, as I think you and I would probably understand it, I didn't know anything about that. And I don't think I've ever really studied it very much. I would say that my heroes now, like I started studying wealth after I became wealthy. So like...
What did you learn about it afterwards? And what do wealthy people do that you think poor people don't do?
They pick higher leverage opportunities, in a sentence. So like rich dad, poor dad, like poor dad says get a job. Poor dad says get a higher paying job. Like rich dad says like, and the thing is there's so many innate beliefs that seem commonplace. Like, well, of course. You know what I mean? Like, well, of course, you know, and you know, you buy some real estate and you know, it'll appreciate over time. Of course, you invest in some stocks. Like, yeah, of course. But like, poor dads just don't say that. And so you have to like learn that, I think. And I didn't, so I'm grateful in that I didn't have to learn that because I heard that just was, of course, yeah, once you have some money, like, of course you don't spend your whole income. Of course you don't. And so there's a lot of course you don'ts that I think I inherited just by being in like a saving father, but there's also some upper middle class people who don't save anything. So like, but I think my dad did I think he helped a lot with like money hygiene. I think I've had a lot of really good money hygiene from my dad. The big breakthrough that I had for me was when I stopped focusing on, and this is going to sound backwards, but when I started my gyms, I was all about building the business, right? And when I built the biggest companies that I've had and now recently sold, and now we have our portfolio, it was about how do we make the most money? And I know that sounds completely backwards, but the only way that you can make the most money is to provide an exceptional valued service and charge a ton of money for it. And because I optimized around making money, I started going for low capital expense businesses because I had lost everything after that 5-year stint. And so I was like, never again am I going to reinvest every dollar from the business back into the business because I've lost it before. So when I started the next business and every business I've had thereafter, like we take dividends every month. And we do that because...
You don't wait till there's an exit 10 years later and put all your money in.
I'd love to do both.
Yeah.
Why not both?
Sure.
Right? And so that was...
Take a dividend and get a bigger
course.
Yeah. But not just put money in and wait and get no money back.
100%. And the thing is, and this was a fallacy I had, because people always talk about like reinvesting in their business, but I realized that just meant that they weren't making profit. And so the vast majority of businesses, even the software world is somewhat shifting in this, but they want to see profit. And then even better is if you have net free cash flow, which is just a fancy word for the amount of money that you can take out every month after making necessary investments in the business. And so I wanted to have businesses that pumped cash flow because I had lost it all before. And so I think there's a lot of, like every one of my business seasons, I would say I've had 3 business seasons. I had my gym ownership period. I had my turnaround and early gym launch day period. And then I had Prestige Labs, the licensing business in Allen. That was like my last season.
Where you exited
all of them. Yeah. And then I'd say like now we're in our 3rd season, I guess. So brick and mortar gyms, licensing, supplements, and software. And then, 3rd season is what we have now. And each of those has a huge magnitude of leverage that was added to it. And so, this like gym launch was started on accident in that I was like, this might be a way that I could make money.
Because people were like, hey, you're doing this pretty well for your own jibs. Can you help me turn
exactly
mine around?
What it was.
Yeah, you're like, can you teach me what you've done?
it was
you're
exactly
like, all right, let me go in here and, I just helped them double their revenue in 60 days. Yeah. Maybe I'm good at this. I'll go. Yeah.
People pay me more for that than they'll pay me to help them lose 20 pounds.
Right.
And so that was when I went from B to C to B2B.
Yes.
And then from there, to be honest, it was just going up another order of magnitude, because now, instead of just building the one business, now we're building lots of businesses at the same time. And so that's kind of like why acquisition.com, I think, has a much higher, has bigger feet, for lack of a better term.
Right. And so what do you look for when you're acquiring a business or investing in a business that has cash flow, and what businesses have the best cash flow?
So this will be relevant for everybody in the audience, and also hits on what we were talking about with the wealth thing. Like, wealthy people choose higher leverage opportunities, and we went over what leverage was earlier. The best businesses, especially in an inflationary period, are businesses that have low capital expenses.
Okay.
And that's because if
you have some examples?
Yeah. So I'll give you opposite examples to make, and then I'll drive it. So something that does have high capital expense, which is what you would not want to get into, would be like stuff that has lots of inventory, stuff that has lots of supply chain, lots of manufacturing, heavy equipment, things where you have to constantly buy more stuff in order to increase capacity, right? A low capital expense business are things like services, right? Services, digital businesses. Software is mixed, because sometimes the development team can be considered a capital expense. So it really depends on how you build the dev team. But the idea is that if you can produce 10 times more units without phenomenally changing the cost basis, then you will have a business that has lower capital expenses.
Yes.
And so that's what you like. And most of those types of businesses produce more cash flow, have more pricing power. And so, that's what Warren Buffett invests in, right? It's high, insurance, Geico.
Right.
There's no capital, it's risk. They're literally assessing risk.
Air.
It's math. Like, the business is math.
Yeah.
Like, if you really think it's just math, is the entire business of insurance. And what's crazy, just as a side note, is that a great way of figuring out the highest leverage businesses that exist is looking at the business that's been here the longest. Insurance has been here since before the world wars.
Right.
The banks have been around forever. Right, J.P. Morgan was around the 1800s.
Wow.
Right, the biggest insurance companies, they're all 100 plus years old. They're founded in the 1800s. And so when you have a business that's lasted that long, to me, that's a great breadcrumb of like, this thing has to print money, because it means that they were able to still keep making money through wars, through famines, through depressions, all of it, and they were still able to keep going. And so I think that when people when you look at all many of the biggest businesses that exist, they have phenomenal gross margins. I don't want to get too business termy here, but like the gross margin is how much incremental cost it is to make an extra widget, right? And so like a pill, for example, costs $100 million to make the first pill. And then every pill after that costs a penny, right?
Sure.
And so the gross margin on the pill is very high, because if they sell each pill for $10 and they cost them a penny, those are great margins. And most people who are small business owners, or people who are trying to get into small business, price like small business owners. They say, well, it costs me $1, I'll sell it for $3, or I'll sell it for $2. But if you're already starting on like a 50% gross margin, it's very, very hard to make money. Because think about it, that's at 100, you're already at half, and then you have the rest of everyone else you have to pay off that extra 50.
Yes.
Very hard to do. And so like, I'll give a couple rules of thumb if anyone wants those. But like, if you're building a service-based business, for us, I by all means, I have to get gross margins above 80%, which means 5 times the cost of goods. So if it costs me $100 a month, the minimum I'll charge is $500, right? And so that also gets you to think about business differently, which is not necessarily even how much can I charge, but how can I provide value and make it cost as little to me? How can I be as efficient as possible? And if you think about what technology does over time, is technology takes something that's valuable and makes the cost of delivering it less. And so that's what happens, is a lot of people are able to have access to things that were once only for the wealthy, but now become for the common man, because the cost basis decreases as a result of technology. And so technology, as we see it, like, we can create technology, but you can also have technological breakthroughs just through process in your own business. It's and that's where niching down and being very specific about the avatar becomes important, especially when you're starting, because then you can productize the service. Because if you're doing everything custom, which most people when they're starting out do, it becomes really difficult to become efficient. And it's really difficult to become efficient, you have very little margin, right? Or you have to charge huge fees, which most people are too afraid to do. And so the flip side is, if I do the same thing over and over and over again, I will get better and more efficient at it, and I will know how to do it faster and quicker and cheaper. And I specifically choose this type of customer so that I can have more margin, because there are millions of even this one specific type of avatar, And then from there, I can take the gross margin, the extra cash that I have, and I can hire the best people. I can invest in marketing. But when you have such little margin to work off of, it's very difficult to make money.
Yeah, it's so hard to grow. That's interesting. What do you think it's going to be harder or easier to become wealthy and start businesses over the next few years with everything that's happened in the last couple of years and where this whole great, 2030 agenda is coming and all these different things are happening, the war and all the, there might be another pandemic, whatever it might be. Yeah. Do you think it's going to be easier or harder to make money?
I think technology in general makes things easier for most people. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's increased access for more people.
Yeah.
And so I think
to reach more people at any moment.
Yeah. If I were just to use history as a guide, business has only gotten easier to get into. It's gotten more competitive and easier to get into. And so I think that what happens is just the arena gets bigger. So you got more gladiators, so it's more competitive, but more people can walk in. And so I think, but for the world in general, the more people you have fighting to make amazing products and services, the better it is for society.
Yeah.
But the downstream effect of that is that in a capitalist system, it is a winner take all for many, not all, but for many businesses. And just by the nature of it, that does create social disarray. And it's just, but the thing is like, it's still the best system that we have. We don't have a perfect system because the other systems remove incentive and humans are driven by incentive.
Yeah.
Even the survivorship bias, like every MLM in the world exists off the fact that there's that one guy who makes $500,000 a month selling shake mix. And the other 5 million shake mix producers are like, someday that'll be me.
I could get there, yeah.
And it's just survivorship bias, right? But that's why the whole capitalist machine works. So I think they're like figuring out some sort of a, creative way. Like I put this on my YouTube channel. But like the idea of having 100% death tax, I thought was like, take down like the income taxes and all this stuff. But like the thing that creates the conglomerate at the top is that if let's say I have $100 billion, right?
That's interesting.
And if I have $100 billion, I'm probably pretty good at managing it because that's why I have $100 billion. So let's say I gain 15%.
You're holding it. You're not using it yet.
Yeah. Let's say I gain 15% on my assets. So I make $15 billion, right, on my assets. It is so hard for anyone to make that up in a lifetime with just the one, and like that might be my kid who gains 15 and the next year he gains 20. Like, and so the compounding effect of the wealth is across generational is where I think it gets crazy. But if there were 100% death tax, because obviously this is aligned with my belief that all of it disappears anyways. So this is obviously Alex's 2 cents in the world. But it's just basically dramatically lower the income taxes. I think income taxes should be like as close to zero as possible, and then make the capital gains taxes higher because that's only going to really affect the wealth if you really want to think about it, right? Because if you make with your hands, awesome.
Right.
If you make on your assets, that's the stuff that has infinite leverage with time. So if you trade the most expensive thing for your money, then I feel like you should get taxed less than if you trade no time for your money.
Sure.
Just as like a weird thought experiment.
What do you think would happen if it was 100% death tax?
I think that billionaires would become far more giving. And as they approach the end, they know they can't keep it. And I also think it would change the way the game is played. Because because this is the analogy that I like, I haven't heard it anywhere else, so I think it's mine. But if you were to imagine life as a poker game, right? And everybody grows up, they become 18 years old, they can go into the casino, they get a chip, or 21, whatever age you can be. And then you get a chip, and then you sit down at the table, and you're dealt cards, right? And there's all the other players around the table. And depending on the cards you're dealt and the skill you have, you begin to amass chips, right? And the difference between this fictitious, casino and the casino of life is that in the real world, you can amass chips, you cash out, you have a big wad of money, and you walk out the door. But in the casino of life, when the Grim Reaper taps you and tells you it's time, you have to get up from the table, but your chips stay on the table, and they push them to the middle to be distributed by everybody else and continue to get played for. And that's when you realize that it was a fake game with rules that never mattered to begin with. And so I bought this piece of land in Austin. It was this huge, it was like a big, really, really nice lot. And I remember thinking to myself, like,
got me some land.
Yeah, got me some land, right?
I own this.
Yeah, I have that tree to that thing on the horizon. It's mine, yeah, right? And then I thought to myself, I was like, well, the guy before me thought the same thing. And the guy before him thought the same thing. And the guy before him thought the same thing. And I was like, and we've literally still been looking at the exact same piece of dirt. And it's just been cycled. Even if it was father to son, even if it was family to whatever, like death taxes everyone 100%. Like, even if the government doesn't, death taxes everybody 100%. And then time taxes your money to infinity, because like people are like, I want to build a legacy. It's like, that's even just with like within Americana, you know what I mean? Within the times of America. But like you go 1,000 years and there's never been the same superpower over a 1,000-year period.
Right.
And so we're like, I'm going to leave a legacy. It's like, but that would be like, you know, let's say an ancient Greek saying I'm going to leave a legacy for my kids when like they might change their currency by, you know, XYZ and there's so many things. And I've had a real experience with this because my great-great-grandfather was a ruler in Iran, which is where we're from. We got kicked out because we were loyal to the Shah back in the day, which is why my dad came to the U.S. And so despite that, my great-grandfather had like 400 wives, ruler, very, very wealthy.
Really?
Yeah, very, very wealthy. Different time, different culture. Very, very well. He was a ruler, right?
Yeah.
All the money, all the women,
everything.
Literally, a ruler, right? And it doesn't matter. And here I am. I'm not even that many generations separated from him, right? Even that.
Yeah, you don't have all that wealth. You don't have that land. Yeah.
Right. And so like the idea that we're going to somehow, like, because the desire for legacy is the desire to cheat death. Like that's what it stems from. It's like we don't want to die. We want to last forever. And so we want to make something that is impermanent. And so we fool ourselves into thinking that the accolades and the material success and the books we write, whatever, are going to last forever. And they're probably not. Right. And so like, I mean, the sun's going to disappear at some point, right? So like, like if we don't do anything before then, like at the very least, that's going to happen. And so if that is the inevitable outcome, I think it shifts the way people think. And I think that's when you start changing. I mean, Tony Robbins talks about like global belief systems. And that's why if someone like adopts a new religious belief, like everything changes because the reasons they do and the way they believe the world works changes. And so I think that if they did do a 100% death tax, it would be a really interesting way to see the downstream effects of how it would change the way the players played the game.
What do you think would happen if all the billionaires started distributing their wealth sooner?
I think what would happen
or would they be as hungry to be and driven to push and build and innovate to generate the wealth if they knew, I got to give this away anyways quickly?
I think they would.
Why?
I think it's because I think I'm going to say something that may sound bad, but I think winners win because of who they are. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's like sales guys. Like you can have an incentive or a comp plan.
They just want to win.
But they are salespeople. And if I get on the phone, I want to sell because of who I am, not because of the comp. The comp is the ticket to get me to say yes to the deal, but it will not change my activity. I will do it because I love to sell, right? And so I think billionaires get there because they love the game. Like you don't get to $1 billion without just, because you obviously don't need it for you. You stopped needing it for you millions and millions ago, right? And so you do it just because you love the game. What I do think, and the reason that I like that solution is because Elon Musk said this, but private enterprise is 10 times as efficient at capital allocation compared to the government.
Right.
So for every dollar that private enterprise spends, it's 10 times more efficient. And so the idea is like if we were to death tax 100%, so whatever you accumulate while you're alive, it just goes back. Like, and the thing is it's not that it would go back into the system through the government. It would if you were lazy. But most people, knowing the government was going to take it, the less efficient vehicle at the end of your life, you would then start thinking about how can I allocate this money efficiently. And so what would happen is you'd create far more ingenuity and innovation around social enterprise before they died.
Solving problems.
Knowing that the wealth would eventually disappear. Mm-hmm. So like it's more there's this backstop that no one wants to hit. And so I think what would happen is they would change their behavior before hitting the backstop. I don't think a lot of people would just be dumping their billion to the government. I think just knowing that they had to would then trigger them to, That would be, hey, that's Alex's 2 cents of the world, which is obviously different. Right now, if you're listening and you're like, I'm not sure if this is the perfect business idea, let me just save you the time. It's not, because look at every other person who has been ultra successful. They have 10 failed business ideas. So just start, so you can just start notching off the bad businesses, right? But extending the time horizon, I think only happens if you do shift the intention